The instruments we're going to need for this exercise are the deluxe bracket holder, a hollow chop, a 3-prong plier, a heavy wire cutter, a flat tip math owl. The supplies we'll need are simply some heavy elastics. These are proprietary elastics. There is a 6.5 ounce and an 8.5 ounce. They are proprietary to the appliance, so you order those whenever you order the D2. We'll need super glue, an accelerator, and a little bit of wax. This is just a little ball of beeswax. You could use Patience Blockout wax. This is the D2 appliance, and of course I've got a Typodon here, but this Typodon is a little different because I've got the pieces separated and the upper arch has no hardware on it at all. So let's take a closer look at this appliance. This is the way it comes, and then it usually comes in a bag with an instruction sheet that just has basic instructions for use. When you open this little tin box, you'll find that there are two distalizers, so you're kind of all set to do maxillary or mandibular distalization bilaterally. Doing you place, let's just look at the parts. You'll place, this is the posterior segment. You can see that it's got a nice big button on it, and then there is the wire is a heavy bow that is very loosely attached to this mesh base, and this allows for free rotation and kind of movement in all 360 degrees. It's kind of very loosey-goosey kind of an arrangement. And then the anterior segment is I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's again a mesh base all ready to bond, and this would typically go on a canine or a bicuspid or a primary C. There is a little, I'm going to see if I can rotate around and you can see this. You can see there's a hole in the end of that right between the beaks. See that? That hole is where the other end of that distalizer slips in there. So it fits just like that. So if you pan out, that's the way it would assemble. So it just slips right into that. And because it's assembled this way, you can change the length of that wire. We can cut it to any length we want. And because this is designed to fit in the between the buccal cusps of a molar of the 6, it can go on the maxillary or the mandibular 6, and this can be set up on left or right, upper or lower. So literally one size fits all. And that is fantastic, because that means I only have to buy one size. So I only need 2 of these, or one tin box of these appliances to do bilateral distalization on a case. And that's really nice compared to some of the other distalizers out there that are similar to this, because the others, you have a fixed distance between the two, the anterior and the posterior segment, and you'd have to buy the right size. So you'd have to keep an inventory of many different sizes, and it's also left or right proprietary, so you also have to keep many left and many right. So it's just a fantastic appliance from a point of view of cost benefit. So let's take a look at the Typodon. What I've brought is the upper has got no hardware on it at all. and that is to send the message, the important message, that this is pre-straight wire distalization. You typically, you don't have to, you could go in and take the brackets off and the bands off in mid-treatment, but typically you would be using this appliance before you start your straight wire series. Typically what's the scenario would be a class 2 case, half step or full step class 2, and you decide that before you put any straight wire on at all, that includes the lower, that you're going to go in and fix the molar. You're going to get what we would call a class 1 molar platform. Once you've established that, then you would take the distalizer off and you would place your straight wire appliance and begin your straight wire to finish the case up. And there are a lot of clinicians out there that would rather pre-distalize a case. That is not what I typically teach. MDA distalization, which is what we usually use, is done in mid straight wire treatment, and it's done during straight wire, the straight wire series, and it's inserted into the straight wire bracket system. The argument has always been that if we pre-distalize and we get this back and then we start doing our regular straight wire series, and during the course of that this slips back forward, what do? Well, we would then go out and get an MDA and put it on there to fix it. And the argument is, well, why would you go through all that if you're going to have to use an MDA anyway? Why not just distalize once? And doctors such as Dr. Dave Jackson, Dr. Bob Garrity, and others in the AOS have traditionally held that position, that we would rather just distalize once. But for those doctors who would rather establish a class 1 platform in advance, especially those doctors who would like to establish a class 1 platform in a mixed dentition, in a phase 1, the D2 might just be ideal for them, as opposed to all the others that are so popular, like the Twin Block and the Mara and all the repositioning appliances and all the distalizers out there that are built to pre-distalize. So anyway, so for our purposes, we're going to simply have the lower arch set up. We have on this Typodont an 018025 stainless steel wire chained 6 to 6 with a furlaw inserted, but that's not really necessary for this appliance. All you need for this D2 appliance is a button or a hook on the 6s. So if you had a band or even a bonded tube or even a bonded button on the 6s to attach your elastic, that's all you would be required. My ideal setup for it would be to have bands on the 6s and a furlaw inside, and just use these molar hooks, and that would be enough. Many manufacturers out there and many clinicians are just going with a button or a bonded tube and an Essig type retainer that snaps on over everything else and just has a window in the Essigs for the little bonded tube with a hook on it or a bonded button. Okay, so let's get started on this, because this is really simple. The first thing you're going to do is size this thing. So what you want to do is take the posterior part of the appliance, and you're going to want to hold it. And the best way I've found to hold it is just to use my bracket holder, and it really kind of pins this wire in place, because the problem is this wire just flops around. So you need to be able to stabilize it. You also have to be able to stabilize it better than that whenever you're using it in the mouth and whenever you're trying to bond it in place. You don't want to fight this wire because it can, if you bump it, it can debond it, pull it back off before your acrylic, or in this case your super glue, has a chance to set. But let's just talk about trying to size it first. What we would do is we would just place it. Now the broader part of that mesh goes towards the occlusal, and that's where that little notch is. You can see that notch in the mesh right there, and that goes right in that groove. See how that fits? That's great. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to look at that, and then we want to look at the bow, and you can see that it has no curvature to it at all. It's just a straight piece of wire. So one of the first things we'll want to do, and that's why I gave you the options to have a hollow chop or a 3-prong, either one. And you're going to take that and you're going to put some curve in this wire, and it just depends, whatever you're of course comfortable with. If you'd rather use a hollow chop to put a little curve in this, that's fine, but it's not a lot. You're just wanting to put a little bit of curve in that bow. So now we can look at it again. You can see I'm getting more adapted to the curve of my teeth in the arch. And the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to mark the I am going to put a little bit more bend in this wire, but then we're going to want to mark this so that we can cut the wire to the right length. So let me put a little more bend in this wire. I'm just creating some curve. So I'm just going to take an AccuMarker. You can use anything. A Sharpie would probably be even better. Anything to mark it. And I guess this would be as good a time as any to show how to use the wax, because what I like to do is take a little bit, and this is just beeswax, but you could use the patient blockout wax that we give them to put over their brackets when they're first getting used to braces. The thing is about this wax, if you're going to use it, you've got to be careful. If you get this wax on that bracket mesh, then you will not get a good bond and the whole thing will debond. And these are expensive, and you do not want this to debond and for your patient to lose it. So it's really critical that you don't get crazy with this and that you just put it on this, just where that you're just wanting to slow down the rotation and the movement of this bow. So I'm just putting a little glob, and see, it'll kind of freeze that for me. Now get kind of set up here. And what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to be able to hold this in place and mark where I want to cut this. And what you want to do is you want to cut this wire. You want to cut the wire longer than you need it by a little bit. It's going to go inside that button, but it still has to be basically at the midline of this canine. So, you know, if that's the midline of the canine, I'm gonna wanna, I'm sorry, I'm having a juggle here. I'm just gonna wanna place that button on the molar. Lay my bow down over that cuspid, and then I can mark where I'm gonna place my cut. Now I may even go a little bit further out because I want to make sure that I'm giving myself enough wire to go inside that button, because you remember it fits in that hole that goes inside that anterior segment. Okay, I think that's going to be all right. So now we'll get our heavy wire cutter. We're going to go in and make a cut. We'll zoom in for that. And if you notice, I'm cutting towards the front end of my mark there because I'm giving myself room to make an error. So the next thing you want to do, I'm going to use my bracket holder to hold this thing. Problem with that is getting that bow to lay right. You need to go check, we need to check that, see if it's going to fit, that our cut didn't distort the wire so much that it's not going to fit in that hole. So I've got to try to check that to see if that's going to fit. I'm going to just grab that in the middle of here. See if that's going to fit, and it does. So you can see now, see that's pretty stable, and that's really pretty critical. You want that to be, you want that to be able to sit deep in that, because that's the only thing that's going to stabilize it. It's not welded. So, okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to glue. The posterior segment goes on first. So for us, it's just going to be a matter of getting the old super glue out, and we can check that distance again while we're here. And it just looks like that's going to be great. So anyway, normally we would, at this point, we would pumice and acid etch both those teeth, the 3 and the 6. And I guess it's a good time to discuss that. If you were trying to distalize a case and you had the molar at 6 years of age, but you didn't have the cuspid, maybe it wasn't even down yet, but you did have the first buy, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen cases where the first buy was available but the canine wasn't. You can make a short one, because this is one size fits all, so you can make it short and go 6 to 4 instead of 6 to 3. You could also, if you had a 12-year-old molar and the canine was blocked out or high, you could go 7 to 4. So that's an option. You could also, if it's early and you've got the 6, but you only have a C, a primary canine, you can bond to that and use the primary canines. There's so many different ways to set this up. So this can literally be part of your phase 1 treatment. You can even do this in 100% mixed dentition if you want to. You can go from the E to the C if you wanted to. I've never distalized in the primary dentition, but you could do it with this if you chose to. Okay, but we're going to go classically from the 6 to the 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get my super glue, and again, I would recommend to you that you use very little super glue. A little bit goes a long way. So we're just going to put a dab, and sometimes it's better to not even use the tube like this, but just to use a toothpick or something like that. All right, so again, we're going to line up on the molar. We're trying to get right in between those cusps. And the only thing that counts right now is placement of that on the molar. And I'm going to cut away because once you've got this, we just have to hold it until this sets. And you're just going to, same thing goes for you guys. Once you've got it on the molar, you just got to wait for it to set. So we'll pause while this is setting up, and I will get some accelerator and we'll spray that. I'm going to go ahead, and we have sprayed this with an accelerator. I'm going to go ahead and kind of tease off this wax that I've got on that button, and this wax, it's just warming up under these lights in here that this is getting pretty soft, which again just shows you that if it's that soft, how much it could get, it could get incorporated into your bracket base and mess up your bond. So when you're using if you use the wax, just know you got to be really careful with it, or you're gonna mess up your bond. I'm just getting all that kind of cleaned out of the way here, because I'm waiting on my super glue to set up good anyway. So, but see, the wax that we've got on there at least has changed that to where it's not rotating quite as freely, which is fine for now. Let me get my beaks and my bracket holder cleaned up. Okay, now let's look at the anterior end of this. We just want to grab it so that we've got that hole where we know where it's at. Then we're going to slip it on that wire. See, it just didn't, you want to insert it till it's all the way up in there. You see what we're trying to set up, and I want to look at it from this angle too. See how it's curved along the arch? See what we created? And that's what you're looking for. So then we're just gonna bond this button to that canine, and we could probably be a little shorter, and that is not a problem. I mean, you can definitely shorten this wire after you've bonded it in the mouth. You could shorten this before you place it, and I'd rather err on the side of too long than to err on the side of too short, because you can't make that up. The only thing you could do then is go to if you had a buy, you could drop back and distalize there if you wanted to. But one of the great benefits of this appliance is being able to distalize an entire segment all at once. So you want to be able to take advantage of moving the canine and molar, and the buys, everything in between, all go back in mass, and that is really awesome. I am going to take this off, and I am going to shorten my wire. So I'm going to shorten this wire by just a hair. And then we'll see if that helped us any. So I'm liking this length better. It's hitting my canine a little bit more mid-tooth, and that's more what I had in mind. So now we're ready to cement that. So the way you would cement it is, again, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this way just for the camera, but I think you'd normally be coming at it like this, but I'm going to come at it like this because I want you to be able to see, and it'll be easier for me to show you. So again, we're just going to take some super glue and put a dab on the mesh, insert this wire into that hole. So we've got it pretty much where we need it, and our super glue is setting up. So I'm going to position it a little better, and then I'm going to cut away again and get the accelerator after it, and then we'll come back. Alright, so I sprayed this with accelerator, and I've got the button glued on, and you know, again, this wire goes into a hole that does not have an exit, so we're pulling back on that button, so we're seating this all the time. So that's the reason why these don't have to be attached. And this is really the big difference between this appliance and the appliance that it reminds everybody of. That's the Carrier motion appliance. But the problem with the Carrier is that each distance between molar and canine, or molar and bi, you have to have bought a whole number of different sizes, and they're also going to be left and right proprietary, and that means that you'd have to buy a series for the left and a series for the right, and that would also, they've also got a different type of a distalizer layout for the lower than the upper, so it adds up. It's a lot of appliances. This, by being able to adjust this wire and adjust its contour, we can customize this to fit anybody's mouth, any age, any quadrant, any arch. It's awesome. And because I can make it as short as going 4 to 6, or I can make this 4 to 7 or 3 to 6. I can make it C to 6. We could, as I said, even use the E's. So a whole lot of different times in the patient's life that we can intervene with this appliance. So we can do it as early as our phase 1 mixed dentition, or as late as we want in an adult. Now I wanted to show you real quickly the setup. If these were articulated, and let's just say that we didn't have any hardware on the lower at all, and we put this band on here, then what the manufacturer recommends is just a band or a button or a tube with a hook on the molar, on the 6, and to have that, if this was on both sides, if we had it on both sides, then you'd have a button or a tube on each 6. If I were going to set it up, I would probably have bands with a furlaw connecting those, because I'm going to run heavy class 2 elastics off this. That means the molars are going to tend to roll. But what the manufacturer recommends doing instead of a furlaw is they want you to make an Essex, a vacuum form retainer that fits over as much of this as it can, and a window is cut out around the 6. So if you just had a button or a tube or a hook bonded on the buckle, then you could do that with an Essex retainer, and it would be a good setup. Wouldn't allow the molars to roll, give you a lot of anchorage. It would also give you one advantage. There would be an occlusal, flat occlusal surface for these teeth to slide on. So they would be free to slide without any occlusion or buckle cuspation interfering with them traveling back. So anyway, the next step would be to take a mouth out and the much heavier elastic, and you would go in and catch the 6 hook, and simply have them take it up and catch this button. And that is really all there is to it. And they wear this 24 hours a day. And like I said, there's two different proprietary heavy elastics. There's a 1 1/4 heavy 6.5 ounce and a 2 1/4 heavy 8.5 ounce. And as you can see, I'm doing this unilaterally. If we had this set up on both sides, we would be, of course, distalizing bilaterally. And this is just going to take a class 2 and take it back into a class 1. And that concludes our exercise on the D2 distalizer.